Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. When the jihadist warlord Abu Muhammad al-Jolani took over Damascus on December 8th of last year, he promised to lead a new post-Assad Syria, representative of all Syrian communities, confessions, and countrymen. Many people in the war-torn nation and the surrounding region chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, almost 9 months later, these words ring hollow, as armed gangs perpetrate horrific massacres, attacking the Druze, Christian, and other minority groups. The onus is now on al-Jolani, who prefers to be known as Ahmed al-Shara, to prove that he can impose his authority not on the besieged victims of Asweda, but on his own Minister of Defense and his henchmen. Joining us to probe the present and probable future of Syria include from Central Israel, Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, who is a research fellow at both the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University as well as at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. It's great to see you, sir.
Great to see you too. Thank you.
It's a pleasure indeed. Also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Hazem El-Jabra, who formerly served as a senior advisor at the U.S. State Department. It's great to see you as well, Hazem.
Thank you.
And with me here in the studio is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, the complexity of Syria is not new to us. We've been dealing with this for a very long time, you even longer than I. So give us a little bit of a understanding. From that moment of December 8th to date, a lot has changed. What is it?
You know, usually we use either in shorthand or in order to graphically bring it to mind to our viewers, we use the capital city as a synonym for the country itself. When we say Damascus, we mean Syria. But this time around, maybe Damascus is the only stronghold that the present ruler of Syria has or will shortly have, because he has not managed to impose his authority on the various districts of the country. Obviously, in the north, Aleppo and other parts, there is the Turkish presence, which we will talk about, the Russian influence, the Kurds, the Americans, the prison camps in which Daesh terrorists and their families, the detention camps, where they are almost on the verge of breaking out or of being broken into and joining their friends. And as you mentioned, Asweda, the problem of the million or so besieged Druze, some of whom want to link up with Israel. It's a problem for Israel in this regard, but right now the high hopes that many people in the world, perhaps most of all President Trump, had that al-Jolani will be a moderate force and will be able to unify Syria, this is in quite a great doubt.
Indeed. Well, I'll start with you, Mr. Al-Jabra, since you also have Syrian origin, not only, but also emanate from an ancestry from there. And at a point where, December 8th came, the Assad regime, which has been really brutal in its crackdown upon the Syrian people, even before 2011, when the uprising was launched initially in Der'a, the southern province, and then erupted in multiple locations across the country. It came crumbling down. Hope was heard from across the four corners of the earth, so to speak, including in Syria. And now we're hearing about, if we take the governorate of Sweden as an example, 235,000 people displaced, approximately 2,000 people murdered, brutally, if I may add. The place is besieged. Water is at 20% capacity, with expectations to diminish all the way down to 8% within just a couple of weeks from now. And the Damascus regime continues to impose its harsh rule, and the new Damascus regime that proclaimed hope initially is unwilling to compromise. What are we to take out of that?
A lot to unfold here, Jonathan. Let's start with the old regime. Obviously, the Assad regime left following 50 years of atrocities, dictatorship, and everything in between. Unfortunately, what we're finding out that the Assad regime was a symptom, was not the disease. There are ingrained issues in Syrian society, politics, daily life, if you may, that need to be addressed. We're not sure, from what we've seen, that the new government in Damascus is capable of not handling the problem only, but understanding the problem. Understanding that liberation in Syria, as they proclaim, is not over. It's actually just begun. Liberating the Syrian mind, the society, the culture, from violence that has greatly increased during the Civil War, toward a new page and new horizons. We're not sure that this group that was born into the conflict, lived through the conflict, and was an integral part of that conflict, will be able to bring the country out of conflict. I don't think they have the expertise, the know-how, or even the ability to seek expertise and advice. As we've seen, the president and his staff are surrounding themselves by like-minded people and ignoring and often dismissing any contrarian opinions or different opinions to what they're doing. That is problematic. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's technical work. It's complex work. It has to do with education. It has to do with, laws that prohibit violence, even verbal violence. All of these things are not being done. Unfortunately, the Syrian government was very successful in foreign diplomacy, in their world tour, if you may. However, all of that was built on a very weak domestic foundation that's getting weaker by the day. And let me land here, the problems are just beginning. There's a drought issue that happened over the summer in Syria. Water is scarce at best, and the crops were affected. So the economic woes also are going to be multiplying over the past few days, few weeks. And it's not looking great. These people need help, and I'm not sure if they're ready to seek help yet.
Absolutely. In this context, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, just during the year 2025-2026, or what's remaining of 25 and 26, the Damascus regime will have to import some 2.15 million tons of wheat just to keep the people fed, something that is quite significant due to the drought, of course, an increase of 53%, no less, than the preceding year, which is something to take into
If I may add, Jonathan, here, wheat subsidies are an integral part of domestic stability in Syria. If that goes away, you're going to have issues on the streets.
Well, the Syrians are not French. The 1920s included the Arab uprising under Sultan Bashar al-Atrash, Druze, who pushed the French mandate out of Syria to Lebanon, and ultimately the Syrians do not eat cake instead of bread. There is a deficit of bread, and they expect it to be a given by the Damascus regime and whoever sits in the seat of power. But when we're talking about Syria, Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak, we're talking about a Turkish project, recognized as such by Washington, by many European capitals. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was the name of the organization designated as a foreign terrorist organization, no less, by the State Department, United Nations, and other countries throughout the West, happens to be utilized, groomed, and developed by the Turkish intelligence agencies. And ultimately, the success of Damascus today is regarded as a national project in Ankara. How does that converge with one another?
Well, I agree with you totally. In the aftermath of the fall of Bashar al-Assad, we all witnessed that Ankara rised here as the most important actor in Syria. The first ever visit that was made to Damascus was made by the head of the Turkish intelligence agency, Ibrahim Kalın, and later we also saw that the first foreign minister ever visited Damascus was Turkey's Hakan Fidan. And needless to say, they are seeing El-Julani, Ahmed al-Shara, as their natural partner. Turkey's neo-Ottomanism stresses the Sunni Muslim identity as a common denominator between the Turks and the Arabs. And therefore, in order to expand Turkey's influence, Ankara is deliberately is adopting this foreign policy doctrine. And in Syria, as Russia and Iran, they were all ousted. And nowadays we are witnessing the Turkish penetration. And recently, of course, we have to mention this very important, event that took place on 13th of August. Turkey and the current Syrian government, they signed a defense cooperation agreement, which also include consultancy, military training, military equipment, weapons system, and of course, logistic materials and supplies will be provided to the Syrian army. So we are not talking about an ordinary alliance. We are talking about a full-fledged, partnership, and obviously the NATO military training knowledge will be transferred to these jihadi terrorists that are, of course, nowadays tagged as the new Syrian army. From the Israeli perspective, when a jihadist, a terrorist, is wearing a tie and a jacket, he or she is not becoming a statesman in a night. We still see that this regime is responsible of the atrocities that were conducted against the Alawites in western Syria, and also against Israel's Druze brothers and sisters in Suwaida region. And therefore, Turkey's increasing penetration in Syria and its stance with El-Julani's government is ringing the alarm bells here in Jerusalem. We have to make it very clear.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen Yanarocak. Of course, prior even to the memorandum of understanding that was signed between Ankara and Damascus, there were already roughly, according to reports, of course, there might be even more than that, but some 200 Syrians from the Quneitra region that were absorbed in Turkey for various training exercises. And we're talking today about roughly 3,000 former members of Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and others, other terror organizations with the same ideology that have integrated not only into the Syrian or the new security forces of Syria, but also into leadership positions, something that should be very alarming, particularly in this case when we're talking about a NATO country providing know-how to those type of radical jihadists. But Mr. Oren?
Well, theoretically, Israel would have been satisfied only with the protection of the territory adjacent to the Golan Heights. If there is a cordon sanitaire, a security zone, fine. But it's never that simple, because you can call it a belt and road doctrine. It's not only the security belt, it's the road to Damascus, only an hour's drive, perhaps another hour or so, you know better, to Jebel Druze, to Sueda. And what you pointed out regarding the foreign troops, which used to be Russian, much earlier Egyptian, during the short-lived UAR, the United Arab Republic. And now, if it's Turkey, it's quite a threat to Israel because Turkey has designs over Syria and is, of course, bordering Syria. So Israel must weigh its various interests, not interfering in the domestic politics of Syria because it's a quagmire. But on the other hand, it's not enough for it just to deploy its forces forward a few kilometers from its border.
Indeed. Mr. Al-Jabra, your take?
Regarding Turkey, yes, Turkey was very involved in the takeover and the closing of the Syrian regime, former one, obviously. Yes, Turkey was very happy to see their allies taking over Damascus. Turkey had a plan, but I don't think things are going according to the plan. This is becoming a headache for Turkey. Obviously, there's more progress on the Turkish side when it comes to the Kurds, for example, than there is on the Syrian side of the border. The issue, what's happening in Damascus, the atrocities we're seeing in Sueda, in the Western Coast and other places, are bringing a lot of negative attention to Turkey and to Turkish role here. At some point, the juice is not going to be worth the squeeze for Turkey. And I think Turkey is kind of stepping back a little bit, trying to understand what they need to do. And let's not forget, when President Trump met with Ahmad Shara in Riyadh, two people were technically in the room two leaders were in the room beside President Trump, Mohammed bin Salman in person, and Erdogan over the phone. And Saudi Arabia and Turkey were seen as the guarantors of a better future in Syria. Now, so far, the Syrian government is doing what is expected of them when it comes to countering terrorism and somewhat to counter foreign influence, including Palestinian factions, Hezbollah, Iran-related factions. It's going well, but everything else is not going well at this point, and that needs to be addressed. I don't know even if Turkey has a plan at this point. Nobody seems to have a plan for this. Nobody expected this collapse to happen that quickly.
Indeed. Well, I will agree with you that it's going well when it comes to the Iranian angle of terrorism. I'm not so sure that they are as vigorous when we're talking about the Sunna jihadist elements within that context. And let's also put things into context. We are talking about a prison, Al-Hawl specifically, where you have 61,000 members of the Islamic State affiliated by family or, of course, fighters as well in that context. And it seems like, as of the last couple of weeks now, the new Damascus regime is integrating those families gradually, granted, but first 17 families, now 38 families just have been relocated to Idlib, the northwestern governorate of Syria, where 38 families just, these are not European families. We're talking here about 400 people that are now taking over lands, receiving lands that used to be, in most cases, abandoned or taken over from minorities or other groups. And that is something that should raise the alarm, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. Two very important points here. Land ownership and real estate ownership is the backbone of any stable society. This is what we've learned in the West, at least through capitalism. that needs to be, that issue of redistribution of land needs to be addressed. But that goes beyond these families and as well. That is happening across the country on different levels and to different people, and that needs to be addressed. The whole issue, I mean, that prison breaks open, it's gonna blow up like a piñata all over the region. It's frightening. And there has not been yet, at least, a plan on how to address it. Unfortunately, I don't think the current government in Damascus has, again, the technical know-how, the expertise, even the willpower to get into this deep reform needed to reform the people in that prison, including a whole generation that was born into that prison and was raised into that prison with very, very, with an amplified terrorist ideology. I mean, you've seen some of the videos and the interviews coming out of Al-Ghul. It's beyond frightening. I mean, these children are not only, fully ingrained in the ideology of terrorism, they also do not understand the world outside of those walls. So, can the Shia government deal with this? Absolutely not. They just can't. They don't know how. And even if they do, they don't seem to be very willing to engage in that complex process.
Well, the fact of the matter is, many of the people, yeah, it is scary, I agree, but many of the people who are speaking about this, let's not forget that in the previous Trump administration, he tried to convince European nations to reabsorb many of those jihadists. Thank God the European countries did not do, in most cases. Unfortunately, in some cases they did. The Netherlands, Germany, the UK, and elsewhere.
The US just took the first person recently.
Well, that's outrageous, to say the least. But nonetheless, Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, Turkey is of the opinion that those people in this Islamic State camp are misunderstood. They are merely family members of those some of the fighters, and they're not necessarily all fighters, and therefore they should be reintegrated into Syrian society, which is evidently what is happening today.
Yes, indeed. We also in the past have seen such a collaboration, an undeclared collaboration between Turkey and the jihadist warriors in Syria. Obviously, the most important common denominator between those two parties were the Kurds. And since Turkey sees the Kurds, the PYD-YPG, or its with whitewashed name, this SDF, as a national security threat, so it has no problem of embracing of these kind of jihadists in condition that they would fight against the Kurdish militias. And in this regard, since we are speaking about Syria, I think that we should also remember and mention the agreement that was signed on March 10th between the SDF and the Syrian government, that this SDF elements had to integrate into the Syrian government mechanisms. But obviously, because of the atrocities that we all witnessed in the Western Syria against the Alawites and the Syrian Jews in southern eastern Syria, we see that the SDF is reluctant from disengaging their weapons. And recently, the Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan openly threatened the Kurds with a concrete military operation, and he called them not to act as a puppet of Israel. I would like to remind that only 4 days before that particular agreement that was signed between SDF and the Syrian government, Mazlum Kobani, the head of the SDF, he openly said that he is open for an Israeli support. Obviously, that particular statement rang the alarm bells, this time in Ankara. And, in a very ironic way, despite the fact that Israel has no intention confronting Turkey. And, we have obviously lots of enemies, and we do not want to add an additional enemy to the list of the enemies, right? But we are seeing that the Turkish government is perceiving Israel as a national security threat. They also made it clear with their national security policy document. They also made it very clear with the last year's parliamentary session in Ankara in October that they perceive Israel as a national security threat. And from their perspective, if Israel and the PYD-YPG will forge an alliance, it will create a very important headache for them for their internal Kurdish question. Because let us also not forget that Turkey recently, last month, launched its Terror-Free Turkey project. That is a brand new name for the peace process with the PKK, and they are calling it as a terror-free Turkey project in order not to mention the Kurdish ethnicity there. And therefore, we are seeing that everything is very much related to everything. So the Turkish-Kurdish peace process is very much related with the PYD-YPG. From the Turkish eyes, PYD-YPG is considered as the continuation, as an offshoot of the PKK inside Syria. So therefore, from the Turkish angle, the Erdogan administration is very much cautious on every kind of incident that is taking place in Syria, because it is affecting directly the Turkish politics, the Turkish domestic politics, which is the survival of Mr. Erdogan.
All right. Well, this is a topic that we will have to revisit. Just for the sake of our viewers, since you heard a lot of acronyms right now, PKK is the communist Kurdish Workers' Party, so to speak, that has been designated as a terrorist organization. The United States, Europe, here in Israel as well. PYD is the female component. YPG is the male component of the Kurdish alliance within the context of the umbrella organization. SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, that was the field designate of Operation Inherent Resolve under the U.S. Operation against the Islamic State during the war against this terrorist organization here throughout the region. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Al-Jabra and Dr. Cohen Yanarocak for all of your insights. I'd like to thank Mr. Oren as well, and to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.